Hello friends, so today we will discuss chapter number 7, Retrieve Superstep. It is unit number 2, chapter number 7. So Retrieve, it basically talks about the successful retrieval of data is the major stepping stone in ensuring that you are performing good data science. So we should be able to retrieve the data, whatever we have stored in the data. So analytical model usage, the data tagged in respective analytical model define the profile of the data that require loading and guides the data scientist. Any additional processing is required. So following methods needs to be done. First, we have to find the unique identifier for each data entry. We call it as the primary key, generally in case of SQL table. So every data entry should have a unique identifier. Allocate a unique identifier for each record or data element in the file that are retrieved. Then data field name verification. Validate and verify the data field names in retrieve process. Then the data type of each data column. Determine the best data type for each column to ensure that you record the correct import processing rules. Then analytical model usage. We will continue. Histogram of each column. Generate a histogram across every column to determine the spread of the data values or the different values that it can have. Minimum value, determine the minimum value in every specific column. So by default, sometimes we insert a value 0. So we need to check whether the minimum value is correct or not. Same way, we have to check the maximum value, determine the maximum value of each column, and it can be assigned to that column if required. Mean, determine the average of a specific column. Median, determine the value that splits the data set into two parts in specific column. Mode, determine the value that appear most in specific column, that is mode. Then range for numeric values. We need to determine the range of values by taking the maximum value and subtracting it with the minimum value. Quartiles are the base values. Dividing the data into quartiles, simply sort the data column and split it into 4 groups that are the that will have 4 equal quartiles. Standard deviation, it's the measure of the amount of variation or dispersion from a set of values. Skewness, determine the shape or profile of the distribution of data columns. Then missing or unknown values, identify the missing or unknown values in the data set. And data pattern, determine the pattern of the data values. Data lakes. A company data lake cover all the data that the business is authorized to process to attain an improved profitability of business core accomplishment. Data lake is the complete data world company interact with during its business lifespan, generate data or consume data or perform a business task. So all the data that is being produced in the entire lifespan of a business, that is put in the data lake. Now data swamp are simply data lakes that are not managed properly. So over a period of time, if we go on dumping the data into the data lake, then it becomes a data swamp, and the data, if it's not managed properly, then accessing any or retrieving any useful information from data lake becomes difficult, and we say it's a data swamp. 4 critical steps to avoid data swamp. Start with a concrete business question. Perform a comprehensive analysis of the entire data set we have. Apply a metadata classification of the data, starting full data lineage for allowing it into the data lake. That means we have to trace the entire history of the data set, and data lake must be unable to collect data required to answer business questions, so that we can make it more useful. For example, calculate the shipping pattern for last 5 years. You would require all the data for last 5 years related to shipping to be available in the data lake. You would also need to start a process of collecting the relevant data in the future at agreed intervals. Data swamp. Data governance is required. Data governance, data access, the data security does not go away with the volume of data in the data lake. So if the data volume is increasing, we need to ensure still that the data still has the security. So spend 70% of the project time on governance and classification of the sources. Data source catalog. Metadata that links data to the data source are the must-have for any data lake. General rules for the data to process includes unique data, catalog number, short description or long description, contact information for external data sources, expected frequency, and internal business process. So these rules needs to be applied to the process. Business glossary. Business glossary maps the data source fields and classifies them into respective lines of business. The business glossary records the data sources ready for the retrieve processing to load the data. Had to perform this classification process using machine learning. Classification bot need to be used in a data lake to find any new or changed metadata. So with this, we have completed our chapter number 7. Thank you.